Sewing is often seen as a feminine hobby, but it is ultimately a survival skill. The very first garments were made to keep people warm in colder climates. The Inuit made clothing by stitching animal hides together with sinew using bones. In today's world of fast fashion and planned obsolescence, having some basic sewing skills is both economical and ecological. So today I'm going to show you the very basics of sewing and some very easy hand stitches.
Alright, let's talk materials. You'll need a needle, some thread, scissors, and you don't need these, but I would recommend some straight pins. These are sewing needles. These are embroidery needles. You can tell the difference because the embroidery needle is blunt. It also has a bigger eye hole. The eye is the part of the needle you pull the thread through. Now with your thread, you can get really fancy and match your thread color exactly to the garment you're working on. But in my travel kit, I literally only have gray, white, and black, and that's plenty adequate, especially if you're going to hide your stitches. These are straight pins. These ones have real nice round heads that make them easier to distinguish and harder to slip out of the fabric. These are only really necessary if you're fixing a big rip or you need to be exact with your measurement. Before we begin, the very first step is to thread your needle. The eye of the needle is very small, and this makes it really hard to get the thread through. The first thing I do is check for a frayed edge. These separate strands make it hard to get through the eye of the needle when it's splayed out like this. To combat this, simply snip the top of the thread off. And then it's just a matter of poking the tip of the thread through the eye of the needle. This is going to take a lot of practice. Now with the other tail end, here's a really easy way to tie a knot. Take and pinch the end of the thread between your thumb and forefinger, and then wrap the thread once around. So now you have the tail and it wrapped once. Keeping it pinched, you're going to push your thumb up, rolling the string like this. It should make a little rolled up loop like this. Now let that go and pinch above it on the string and slide your fingers down. You will feel it catch and make a little knot. Alright, now that we have our needle threaded, we can start sewing. So the first thing we have to do is come up through what is called the wrong side of the fabric. The right side would be the side with patterns or the side that everyone gets to see, and the wrong side is the back of the fabric that no one sees. When you are sewing, you want to make sure your knot from your string goes on the wrong side. So we push our needle through the back and come out the right side. And there is our knot back on the wrong side where no one will see it. This first stitch is called the straight stitch, and it's pretty much just what it sounds like. You're going to go back into your fabric from where you pulled out the first one, about a ½ centimeter away, and making a straight line. Push your needle back through and pull it out on the wrong side. Make sure your thread doesn't catch anything and lays flat against the fabric like that. Now, I find it easiest to go over to the wrong side, and we're going to want to come up really close to where we just came through, but not in the same hole or you're going to pull your stitch out. So, if you can see the knitting of the fabric. So I'm going to go just like that close. See, there's only a couple of threads between me and that last stitch. Push it back through and come out. Now to continue the stitch, you repeat the step from earlier. Going in about ½ centimeter, back down, and out the wrong side. So then you just continue to do this all the way down. This is good for combining two flat pieces of fabric. Now, I'm using black thread here, but if you used a gray, just like you can see on this hem up here, you really would only barely be able to see it. But this is not one that's good for hiding stitches. The next stitch I'm going to show you is called a back stitch. This is another great reinforcement stitch for two flat pieces of fabric that's not on an edge, and I'll show you what I mean by on an edge with the next stitch. But for the back stitch, all I've done so far is come up through the wrong side of the fabric. You'll start this way every time. Now, this one's going to look really similar in the first one. We're going to make just a small, about 1/2 centimeter, maybe smaller, stitch. Pull the string nice and flat. Boom, a little baby stitch. Now for this one, instead of coming up right next to where we just came out, we're going to go to the back side. I think this is easiest for beginners. And we're going to go about 1 stitch length away and come up through the top side. Here's the right side, that is a little big. It's always good to flip over before you've pulled your needle through and see how far away you are. As you can see, this needle is a little higher and way farther away than I wanted it. But on the back, it looks a lot closer. Now that's better. Come up through the right side of the fabric. I'm going to lay this flat. And now what you're going to do is you're going to go back into the exact same hole this stitch had. Since you've come up over here, doing this is not going to pull your stitch out like it would do with a straight stitch. So for the back stitch, I'm going to bring you nice and close. I'm going to go in the exact same hole this came through. This limits the number of holes that go in your fabric, while also making a really strong and tight stitch. I'm using an opposing color so that you guys can see what I'm doing really well, but if this was gray, you wouldn't even be able to tell these were separate stitches. They would look just like one line. Now see, I came up a little higher. If that happens to you, let me show you how to really easily take out your stitch. This is why we don't tie this end of the string. You unthread your needle, and if you mess up like I have, you're going to take the top needle, or if you have a seam ripper, but that's a little fancy, and pull gently up until the back half of the thread comes out. Now we can try again. This is a great tip to have for beginners. Now we're going to talk about doing things on an edge. Now, those last two were great for flat pieces of fabric, and what I mean by that is you have one piece under and one piece over, and then the stitch would go here, tying it together at that line. On an edge means if you have a piece of fabric like this, for closing pillowcases or holes in the side of things or holes in hemming. I'm going to show you the whip stitch first. So this is where your straight pins, if you have them, come in handy, but if not, just pinching the fabric is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to lay a pin. You want to take the fabric and pinch like this, and then you're going to take the top 2 fingers and pinch. So you're pinching between your thumb and your ring finger, and your pointer finger and your middle finger, and you're going to pull flat, making sure the edges are lined up, and this is where you want them to go. Then, for a sewing machine, you would want to lay it this way. For hand stitching, you can lay it either way. I find this better because it covers more surface area. So I'm going to poke the pin in the top. This is kind of thick t-shirt fabric. And then you kind of pull, not so the needle comes out, but so it's close. And then you're going to bend the needle back and sort of using your thumb to push your fabric forward. You're going to find that your needle part comes back out. And now your pin lays flat. And you can gather more fabric than that. I just did a small one to show you. And now this will stay together so that when you're over here, this could get misaligned like this, but this is going to stay aligned because your pin is holding in place. And that's what pins are really for. All right, let's work on this edge. I have my needle threaded over here. Again, black thread so you can see what I'm doing, and only one knot tied, the other loose and free. So now for this, a whip stitch, this is all going to be right side. As we know, everyone will get to see this. So where do we put the knot? On the inside. So you want to slip your needle between the 2 layers of fabric. I normally go, if I've got a nice corner like this, that's where I want my thread to come out. So I'm going to line it up here. See, my needle is coming through on the inside. So when my knot comes through, the knot can easily get tucked in there. So when I fold it, no knot. Okay, now the whip stitch is probably what you think of when you think of sewing. We're out on this side of the fabric. We're going to come to the side facing us, And we're going to go a little ahead of it. Catching those corners, pushing in, and boom. Just one little loop. With this, make sure your loop doesn't come over to the side. Make sure it's lined up where you want it, which is on this edge. So I just use my needle to guide it forward. Now I'm going to pull my string. That's where I want it.
Well, now you know some basic sewing skills. I hope these come in handy for you. Make sure you subscribe to Sew Fantastique for more tutorials and sewing skills. Bye!